Good morning, class. Today we're going to be talking about women in World War II. So I want you to take out your journals and I want you to write a few sentences, or just jot down a few thoughts about what you think of when you think of women during World War II, if you think of anything. Okay, some of you might have thought of the image of, who can tell me who this is? Yes, Rosie the Riveter. Thank you. Rosie the Riveter is a very iconic image of a woman during World War II, and so some of you might have thought of her. But let's look at different roles women had during the time. We had many women that served in the military. Then we also had a lot of women that entered the workforce, such as Rosie the Riveter. That was a new frontier for women. And then we also had many women that served in the war effort from their homes doing volunteer work. Between 1941 and 1945, 200,000 women served in the United States military. Really over 200,000 women. I've seen figures as high as 350,000 women. But there were a variety of different branches of service that they served in. We also had 6 million women that joined the workforce for the first time. And then many, as I said, many joined the war effort from home through volunteering and civic service. We are going to look at a video that is some stories of some women from Georgia that highlight the different areas that women worked in during the war.
And while our men were fighting the enemy, American women were fighting battles of their own. We found 3 Georgia women whose different wartime roles were just as important to the nation's war effort. She was called Rosie the Riveter, this World War II poster girl, a symbol for the hundreds of thousands of women who helped build America's warplanes and warships. Pat Barrett was one of them. With her husband shipped overseas, this Georgia housewife began turning out B-29 bombers at the Bell Aircraft Company in Marietta. Her class learned from day one their work had to be perfect.
Well, they kept telling us, now, if you don't do it right, if you leave one little rivet, crooked or halfway in or not done correctly, might be some air that would gather under that piece of aluminum and might get enough air in there that the whole plane would blow up. And we didn't know the difference.
Once it was frowned upon for women to work. But with all the able men gone off to war, it suddenly became the patriotic thing to do. Defense plants needed workers and encouraged women to leave their kitchens with confidence-building ads.
After a short apprenticeship, a woman can operate this drill press as easily as a juice extractor in her own kitchen. And a lathe will hold no more terrors for her than an electric washing machine.
It was an exciting time as women began proving to themselves and others what they could accomplish. Pat Barrett still remembers the first time she saw a B-29 that she helped build, all in one piece, ready to fly.
We were so excited to see that plane get up in the air and just circle around until we just didn't know what to do. We were just the happiest people living.
Unforgettable, that's what you are.
Plenty of young people fell in love during World War II, but Creola Barnes and Walter Belton made no promises to wait for each other, but they did promise to write.
I wrote him every week and sometimes twice a week, and I would tell him what I was doing, how I was coming along in school, how much I missed him, how much we prayed that he would come back.
He was a soldier on the front lines. She was a student fighting her own battles back home. She worked 3 jobs to save enough money to go to nursing school. At a time when most black women worked as household help, she says she had the stickability to make her own way.
There were times I thought, boy, this is a rough road. But I'm grateful that I made it. And as I look back, it's a joy. I was glad because no one had to do it for me. I was able to do it myself and it didn't cost my mother one nickel.
Creola Barnes became an Army nurse, and she married her beau the day he returned from the war.
We would go weeks and weeks without letters, and all of a sudden we'd get a whole stack of them.
More than 1 billion letters were exchanged during the war, so the government found a way to save much-needed cargo space. Letters were put on microfilm, shipped overseas, and then blown back up. It was called V-mail, Victory Mail. And mail call was a big morale booster for 21-year-old Helen Denton, a WAC in the Women's Army Corps. She had jumped at the chance to go to London to serve under General Dwight Eisenhower, but the city was often bombed. She felt lonely, homesick, and scared.
I remember one time a bomb hit in the building that I was in, and when I came to, they were slapping me because I was screaming.
Helen Denton had an important job to do. She typed the orders for a top-secret mission, the plans for D-Day. A guard was always posted outside her door.
Each day he would come in and pick up my carbon paper that I would use and my typewriter ribbon, take it off. We had a little fireplace in the office, and he'd burn it in there. Then I could go home.
When D-Day came, a whopping 150,000 Allied troops invaded the coast of Normandy in France, catching the enemy by surprise. That set the stage for victory in Europe and huge parades 1 year later. When Japan surrendered too, the deadliest world war in history was over.
And even today, whenever I see the American flag being raised or the national anthem, I get tears because I still remember what a thrill it was to be marching in a large parade and being a part of it.
So I just love those personal stories from those women about what they were doing during the war. So let's look at women in the military. This is a photograph of some women that were pilots. Women served in their own branches of service. There was the Women's Auxiliary Army Corps, later known as the Women's Army Corps, WAC. Women Air Force Service Pilots, WASPs. Women accepted for volunteer military services, the WAVES. And then women also served in the Marines and a branch of the Coast Guard called SPARS. There were 1,102 of the women pilots who served as Women Air Force Service Pilots, the WASPs. I just think that's fascinating. I had no idea that there were that many women pilots during the war. They were not participating in armed combat, though. Their duties were mostly away from the front lines, but the women in the Army and Navy Medical Corps, several other groups of women would be close to front lines and could be in dangerous situations. But about 70% of them worked in various jobs such as typists, clerks, and mail sorters. Then we had many women in the workforce for the first time. Now, this wasn't the first time women worked outside of the home, but it was still a very small percentage of women that did before the war, and they were typically in very traditionally female jobs. We see in these photographs women doing a variety of jobs, working in a factory, being telephone operators. For the first time, they were able to do almost any job that previously only a man had been able to do.
When America entered World War II,
Let's listen to this
California's
song
Dust Bowl
about Rosie
refugees
the
were
Riveter.
absorbed into the army.
Keeps a sharp lookout for sabotage, sitting up there on the fuselage. That little frill can do more than a mill can do, Rosie the Riveter. Rosie's got a boyfriend, Charlie. Charlie, he's a Marine. Rosie's protecting Charlie, working overtime on the riveting machine. When they gave her a
enter the workforce in these large numbers because of the gap that was created by all of the men departing, the soldiers departing for war. And they were able to move into jobs that had never been open to women before, such as in the defense industry. Before World War II, women's paid labor was largely restricted to traditionally female jobs. World War II changed both the type of work women did and the volume at which they did it. Many women took jobs in defense plants and factories or positions in offices, which had mostly been exclusive to men before that. Women workers were recruited to work industrial jobs, as represented by the poster that we saw, that we see here of Rosie the Riveter. The government had a campaign to try to get more women to work these jobs because they didn't really think they were able to do it. Rosie was based on a real-life munitions worker, but she was a fictitious character. She became the most iconic image of a working woman during World War II. I think it's really interesting that in Marietta, the Bell Bomber plant, some of you might know as Lockheed Martin, opened during the war and employed 28,000 workers, 10,400 which were women. They built 663 B-29 bombers during the war. And just to give you an idea of what a large impact this was on our community, at the time when the plant opened, there were only about 8,000 people living in Marietta, and the plant employed 28,000 workers. Women at home. Women at home did a variety of volunteer jobs to help out with the war effort and help out in their communities. They did things like growing a victory garden, which would just be to add more food to the food supply. Food was hard to come by in some areas. And then here you see a woman collecting old nylons for the war effort, which were pantyhose, if y'all know what those are. Women volunteered for the Red Cross, the Office of Civil Defense, provided recreation to the men in canteens for the USO. They sold war bonds. As I said, they planted victory gardens. There's many different ways for them to serve from home. So right now, we're going to divide into 3 groups. I've already assigned you your groups for this group discussion time. And our 3 groups, we're going to have women in the military. Y'all go over here. Women in the workforce, let's sit in the middle section. And women at home over here. And you need your laptops for this because we're going to be looking at primary sources. I've provided you several secondary sources already, some books, and for women in the military, we have the women pilots of World War II, and then we also have the book Code Girls, which is a really interesting story. It's the untold story of American women code breakers of World War II. And then for the Women at Work group, we have Beyond Rosie the Riveter book and the Bell Bomber plant book. And then Women at Home, we have Those Incredible Women of World War II. And then I also want you to look at the site of primary sources, the oral history sources, which is the What Did You Do in the War, Grandma, which is a really interesting site. So I'm going to come around. Let's take some time to do that now. I want you to find at least 3 primary sources in your groups, and we're going to need these sources to do our individual projects, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Okay, I've enjoyed coming around and seeing just the interesting sources y'all are finding. Let's take a look at, I've passed out the instructions for the journal project. Let's take a look at that. You're going to put this page in your journals, and then within this notebook, you're going to keep your journal for the project. What we're going to do is you're going to come up here and select one of these photographs I have of different women from the war, and you're going to just to stay in the same groups that you were working in, but this is an individual project. So if you were a woman in the workforce, you're going to select a picture that looks like a woman in the workforce. And you're going to create a woman from that picture that's fictitious, but she's going to be based on a historical sources, the primary sources that we have found. In your instructions, let's go through these together. You'll see that you're going to do an introduction. There needs to be a paragraph, double-spaced, that includes your woman's name and age at the beginning of the war in 1941. How old was she in 1941? Then what is her family background? Does she have a family? Does she have children? Is she married? If she's, a student, if she has siblings. Where are they from? So be as specific as you want to be here, but put a city and state that they're from, or if they're from another country, you can put that. Then you're going to put how your person felt about America becoming involved in the war. So after Pearl Harbor and America enters the war, how was she feeling at that point? And then when the picture was taken, what was going on in the picture there? Then what we're going to do is we're going to do 5 journal entries. They're going to be 150 to 200 words each. And you're going to write about a day in the life of your woman in that year. So we're going to do 1 entry from 1941 for each year through 1945. And be historically accurate. You're making up a lot of this stuff, but it needs to be based on what was going on in history. And I have some suggestions here for you. Like the daily life during the war. What was the work that they were doing? How did they feel about what was going on in the war? What they were reading in the newspaper or hearing about what was going on. Or maybe they knew someone that was wounded or killed in action and that was affecting what was going on in their life. What were they doing socially to pass the time? Either as a civilian or a woman in the military. What were they doing? Were they going to the USO? Were they going on dates? What were they doing? And then I need everyone to include 3 primary sources for this project. So it could be anything from a political cartoon. I've seen some of you find those in your research. It could be a letter. They can be other photographs, government posters. They can be songs. But cite 3 sources for me at the end of your 5 journal entries. Okay, and then we're going to come back and look at this in a few days, and we're going to share with each other some of the things that we found and some of your insights into putting yourself into the shoes of a woman during the war.
3 days later.
Okay, so what does the word perseverance mean? Do you know what the word perseverance means? Let's think about the word perseverance. The definition of perseverance is a continued effort to do or achieve something despite difficulties, failure, or opposition. Let's read these verses about perseverance. In Romans 5:3-4, it says, "Not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance, character, and character, hope." And then Galatians 6:9 says, "Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." I think this character trait in these verses would mean so much to women during World War II. What does perseverance mean? Like that definition says, it's just continuing on through hardships, and despite what's going on, you just are continuing to be steadfast. I know, like in sharing these journals, we saw how women were able to embody this trait during the war, didn't we? And how, but let's talk about how we are called upon to demonstrate perseverance in our lives today. Because we aren't in a time of war, but that's still a trait that we need to embody. Thank y'all so much for your work on your journals. Y'all did a great job, and I've enjoyed reading your journal entries and the creativity that you put into them. And it's just a great opportunity for you to use these primary sources as well. It's so interesting for us to have these sources to really get an actual glimpse of what lives were like during World War II. What women were going through, whether they were in the military, the workforce, or volunteering on the home front. we just really get a lot of insights from this, and I hope that y'all have enjoyed this project. Class is dismissed.